Hello, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of our podcast. In today's episode, we'll take a look at a bizarre mass murder that seemed to be motiveless. The way it was solved over a decade later is shocking. So, without any further delay, here's this week's episode. Chesnee is a small town in South Carolina. It's only a few miles from the border of North Carolina. In 2003, the town had a population of about 1,000 people. Just outside of Chesnee was Superbike Motorsports, which was owned and operated by 30-year-old Scott Ponder. The shop sold and repaired motorcycles and recreational vehicles like ATVs and dirt bikes. Scott had opened the shop 2 years earlier and it was successful. He had even won an award from Suzuki. Scott was married and his wife, Melissa, was 3 months pregnant with their first child. On the afternoon of November 6, 2003, Scott was working in the shop. Also working there that afternoon was Scott Ponder's mother, Beverly Guy. Beverly had started working at the shop a few weeks earlier as the bookkeeper. She was trying to keep busy after the recent death of her mother. The service manager was 29-year-old Brian Lucas. He and Scott had been lifelong friends. Brian and his wife had 2 young boys. That day, Brian had been looking at houses with a realtor. He got into the shop around 2:30 that afternoon. Scott's best friend, 26-year-old Chris Sherbert, was the shop's mechanic. Chris and his wife often spent holidays with Scott and his wife. Chris was also working that afternoon. Mid-afternoon, a friend of Scott and Chris, Noel Lee, called the shop. Scott had some tickets for him for motocross arena racing. After talking to Scott on the phone, Noel immediately drove to the shop. He was there within 10 minutes of hanging up the phone. In the parking lot, he found the body of 30-year-old Scott Ponder in a pool of blood. Noel thought it was a prank, but he quickly realized that his friend was either dead or dying. Noel ran to the front entrance and he found the body of 30-year-old Brian Lucas. Noel went into the shop to call 911. In the showroom near the washrooms, he came across the body of 52-year-old Beverly Guy, who was also in a pool of blood. Then in the back of the shop, he found 26-year-old Christopher Sherbert, who was slumped over a bike he was likely working on. Unfortunately, none of the victims survived the shooting. They had all been shot with a 9mm handgun multiple times in the body and the head. The police said that the murders were methodical and the shooting was probably done in a minute or two. It was speculated that the killer came through the back door and killed Chris Sherbert first. He then shot Beverly Guy in the showroom. Near the entrance, he killed Brian Lucas. Brian was possibly running away when he was killed. It is thought that Scott Ponder had tried to escape, but unfortunately, he only got to the parking lot before he was gunned down. What the police found odd was that nothing had been stolen. This includes an envelope of money that was in plain sight. The police had several possible leads. One was a couple who was seen near the shop around the time of the shooting. They had been arguing, and the woman was seen running away from the scene. Another suspect was a man seen in the shop around the time of the shooting. A customer left around 2:45 p.m. after making a layaway payment. When he left, he saw Scott talking to a white man with dark feathered hair who was between the ages of 25 and 40. He was about 6 feet tall and he weighed 175 to 200 pounds. The witness noted that the man was wearing a leather coat, which he thought was strange because it was a warm day. It appeared that the man was looking to purchase a motorcycle, but he wasn't very knowledgeable about motorcycles. Scott had even started filling out a purchase form, but he did not write down the man's name, address, or credit card information. The police were able to track down the couple. They were known drug users, so they speculated that they killed the 4 people in a botched robbery. But why would they methodically and coldly execute everyone only to steal nothing? The couple was quickly eliminated as suspects. We're just going to take a short break to bring you a word from our sponsor, Best Fiends. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Usually, I like really intense thriller and horror novels. But easily, one of the best books I've ever read is Bridget Jones's Diary. It's funny and heartfelt and easily my guiltiest pleasure when it comes to books. I don't tell many people about my love for Bridget Jones's Diary because it's embarrassing. Something I'm definitely not embarrassed about is how much I love the game Best Fiends. Best Fiends is an incredibly fun match 3 game. You collect a cast of fiends that you use to solve each level and defeat the slugs. It's been downloaded over 1 million times and has a 5-star rating. It's great for casual gamers like myself. I just love that I can pick it up and play at any time. I'm already at level 50 and I can't wait to finish recording this ad so I can go play another game. It's one of those games where I keep saying to myself, I'll play just one more level. Next thing I know, I've been playing for an hour. New levels, events, and challenges are added every month, so there's always something new to do in the game. Download Best Fiends free today on the Apple Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R, Best Fiends. The one thing that the police thought was odd was that if the man in the sketch, who was seen talking to Scott just before the murders, was just a witness, why had he not come forward? So the police suspected that the man was most likely the killer. The police thought he may have come into the store posing as a customer. He scoped out the shop and then left. He re-entered through the rear and started executing the employees. But why would someone do that? Clearly, robbery was not the motive. One theory was that Chris Sherbert was involved in the drug trade and the murders were somehow connected to that. The police investigated this angle and found no validity to it. Over a year went by and the police still did not have a suspect. They had Scott's widow, Melissa Ponder, come in for an interview. She brought her son, Scott Jr., who was born about 6 months after his father's murder. During her visit to the police station, she changed Scott Jr.'s diaper. What Melissa didn't know was that the police collected the diaper and they used the waste to get a sample of Scott Jr.'s DNA. Then they did a paternity test. The results showed that Scott was not the father of Scott Jr. They confronted Melissa about this and she was shocked. She was adamant that Scott was the father and she demanded that the paternity test be done again. The test was done again, and it confirmed that Scott was not the father. Not only that, but the police had figured out who fathered the boy. It was Brian Lucas, who was the service manager who was also killed in the massacre. The police suspected that Brian wasn't happy in his marriage and he started having an affair with Melissa. The police already knew that Brian may have been thinking of leaving his wife. On the day he was murdered, Brian had been out with a realtor. His wife had no knowledge he was looking for a new place to live. The police thought that either Melissa or Brian's wife, Robin, committed the murders due to a love triangle. The police spent a year and a half investigating this angle. Melissa was adamant that she and Brian had not been involved in an affair and Scott was her son's father. Then, the police told Melissa there had been a mistake. Someone had labeled the blood wrong. When they did the two tests to see if Scott was the father, they weren't using Scott's DNA. Then when they thought they were testing Brian's DNA, it was really Scott's DNA. The families of the victims were frustrated with the police. They wondered if, during their investigation into the love triangle theory, did they miss an opportunity to arrest the real killer. Years went by and no progress was made on the case. In March 2012, 9 years after the murders, the police released a new sketch of the killer. A reporter asked the sheriff if the man in the sketch was a person of interest. The sheriff said, "I'm going to be bold enough to say, this is my man right there." But the sketch did not lead to an arrest. The police and the victims' families thought it would take a stroke of luck to solve the case. It turned out that they were right, but it wasn't a stroke of good luck. Instead, it was a stroke of terrible luck for a couple named Kayla Brown and Charlie Carver. We're going to take one more quick break to talk about our amazing sponsor, Audible. I've been a fan of Audible for years, even before they started sponsoring us. My favorite time to listen to Audible is when I'm doing chores like washing the dishes. I can't wait for it to get a bit warmer outside so I can listen to Audible while I go on walks. Audible not only has the best collection of audiobooks on the planet, they also have amazing original titles and podcasts. A great original podcast you get free with your Audible membership is called Shootout. It's about this wild bank robbery in 1997 in Los Angeles. I've seen news footage of the bank robbery and the ensuing shootout, and it's like something out of a movie. The podcast is just as riveting, and I couldn't stop listening to it. Not too long ago, Audible launched Audible Plus. With Audible Plus, you get access to thousands of titles, including audiobooks, podcasts, and series, and you can listen without limits. You can listen offline, anytime, anywhere. I love listening to Audible on my Alexa. I just say, "Alexa, play my audiobook," and within seconds it's playing. If you're looking to get into Audible and you need somewhere to start, or if you have Audible and you're looking for a recommendation, I strongly suggest the audiobook American Predator by Maureen Callahan. It's about one of the scariest serial killers I've ever come across, Israel Keyes. American Predator is haunting, but you'll have a hard time stopping yourself from listening to it because it's just so interesting. Sign up for Audible today to get Shootout and American Predator. Visit audible.com/listed or text listed to 500 500 to start your free 30-day trial. Once again, for your free 30-day trial, check out audible.com/listed. That's audible.com/listed or text LISTED to 500 500. Find something great to listen to and help support Criminally Listed by checking out Audible. 30-year-old Kayla Brown and 32-year-old Charlie Carver started dating in May 2016. They moved in together a few months later in August 2016. Carver worked at a manufacturing plant that made tissue paper. He wrote in his spare time. Brown cleaned houses for real estate agents. On September 3, 2016, Carver's mother asked the company that manages the couple's apartment complex to check their apartment. They found the apartment unlocked and Brown's dog was inside of it. It was apparent that the couple had not been there in a few days. After that, Carver's mother reported him missing. 2 days after Carver's mom filed a missing persons report, Brown's friend reported her missing. The police learned that the last time anyone communicated with the couple was on August 31st, 2016. That was also the last day Carver's debit card was used and the last day they used their cell phones. The couple was supposed to meet up with some of Brown's friends for dinner that night, but they didn't show up. Brown's car was parked at the apartment complex, but Carver's car was missing. Then, after a few weeks of silence, someone using Charlie Carver's Facebook started sending his friends strange messages and making odd posts. The messages and posts would say that he and Brown were fine and that they had gotten married. One time, the person posted a picture of the couple, but it was an old photo and it was deleted shortly after it was posted. Most people immediately suspected that it was not Carver using Facebook. Several people sent messages to the profile and wrote comments demanding to know who was doing the writing. On October 2nd, just over a month after the couple disappeared, the person using Carver's Facebook wrote, "What color ribbon supports the people who can't keep their nose out of other people's business?" Before Carver started dating Brown, he was married. He and his wife had split up, but their divorce had not been finalized. Carver's estranged wife deeply hindered the police investigation. She claimed that the couple was alive and well and she had been communicating with them. The police followed up on several things she said, but it did not lead to Carver and Brown. The police felt like she wasted a lot of their time. The police managed to secure several search warrants. One of these warrants allowed them to access Kayla Brown's Facebook records. They learned that around the time the couple went missing, they had planned on doing some work on a property in Woodruff, South Carolina, owned by a real estate agent named Todd Kohlhepp. Brown had previously done some cleaning jobs for Kohlhepp. The lead detective thought that this was promising because they had gotten the couple's cell phone records. The last time their cell phones pinged, it was in the area where Kohlhepp has property. Kohlhepp's property was nearly 100 acres. The police went to the property and discovered it was surrounded by a large chain-link fence. The police did some surveillance by flying a helicopter and a drone over the property. They saw some buildings and a forest on Kohlhepp's land. The police then got search warrants for Kohlhepp's Facebook records and his phone records. On November 3, 2016, the police executed a search warrant on Kohlhepp's property. As they were searching the property, they came across a 30-foot by 15-foot shipping container. They heard some banging and screaming that sounded like it was coming from inside the shipping container. There were 5 padlocks on the doors of the shipping container. The police cut them off, and inside, they made a remarkable discovery. It was 30-year-old Kayla Brown. She was alive and in relatively good physical shape. She was handcuffed and there was a chain wrapped around her ankles. There was also a chain around her neck that was attached to the shipping container. Here is a recording of the actual rescue.
Just a girl. Just a girl. Just a girl. How are you, honey? This is bolt cutters. This is our best. He's a paramedic.
Oh yeah.
Okay, we're gonna get you out of there. Okay.
Just hang loose for me.
You're okay. We're here. Okay. Bolt cutters.
Just both feet.
Just one.
Let me
It's
see.
attached to a chain from
Okay.
the wall,
Okay.
and my neck's attached to the wall up here.
Okay. All right. All right. We're gonna get you out, sweetheart. Okay.
You got a handcuff, you.
I got no one's in my car. I got no one's under my car.
Do you know where your buddy is?
Charlie,
Yes.
he shot him.
He shot him.
Who did? Douche.
Todd Kohlhepp shot Charlie Carver 3 times in the chest, wrapped him in a blue tarp, put him in the bucket of the tractor, locked me down here, and I never seen him again.
Okay.
He says he's dead and buried. He says there's several bodies dead and buried out here, and he
Okay.
says that the dogs will be ruined if they go looking because there's red pepper.
We're gonna step you out, sweet. Because there's what?
Red pepper.
Okay.
Tell the dog people that.
He says
No,
there's pepper everywhere around the car. The car's supposedly in a ravine in the back of the land.
Okay.
Kayla Brown was rushed to the hospital. She had no major physical injuries. 45-year-old Todd Kohlhepp was immediately arrested. After Kayla Brown was rescued, she told the police about her harrowing experience. She said that on the day they went to Kohlhepp's property, Kohlhepp murdered Charlie Carver while she watched. He shot him 3 times in the torso. He then led her to the shipping container. He chained her up and put a ball gag in her mouth. This was just the start of her nightmare. Every afternoon between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock, Kohlhepp would retrieve Brown from the shipping container. He would remove the neck and ankle chains, but for the first few weeks, he did not take off the handcuffs. He would take her to an apartment above his garage. He was always armed with a gun. He would then sexually assault her. Most evenings, he'd do the same thing. In the evenings, Kohlhepp would feed Brown her only meal of the day. Most of the time, it was fast food. The way Brown was chained up in the shipping container, she had to sit all day. She slept on 2 thin dog beds in the storage container. He gave her novels, adult coloring books, and an MP3 player to keep her busy. He also gave her snacks. For a toilet, she was given a bucket and a bottle of air freshener. Every other day, Brown was allowed to wash herself with a washcloth. To keep her in line, Kohlhepp would try to scare her by telling her that he was a serial killer and a mass murderer. In custody, Kohlhepp offered the police an arrangement. He wanted to talk to his mother, he wanted to give her a photograph, and he wanted to transfer money to a college fund for a friend's child. If he could do that, then he would confess to his crimes. The police agreed to the arrangement. He shocked the investigators by confessing to the Superbike Motorsports murders that happened 13 years earlier. He knew details about the murders that only the killer would have known. For example, he knew that all the victims had been shot in the forehead. That detail had never been made public. Supposedly, Kohlhepp had purchased a bike earlier and wanted to return it. He said that the staff belittled him because he didn't know how to ride a motorcycle and he felt humiliated. So he went back sometime later and got revenge by killing them. Here's part of Kohlhepp's confession to the police.
I actually wasn't meaning to hit the mom.
You actually what?
I was not meaning to hit the mom. I prefer not to shoot women if I can.
Okay. Tell me what happened then.
Finally all 4 showed up. From the sound, it sounded like there was nobody else there. I cleared it in under 30 seconds.
You what now?
I cleared that building in under 30 seconds. You guys would have been proud. I'm sorry, but you guys would have been proud.
Okay, so the mechanic took the bike in the back to prep it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then what happened?
Proceeded to go to the back mechanics area where
Bear with me, because you use big words.
walked up, pulled out the Beretta, put the safety off, shot the mechanic twice. Once I realized that he was no longer a threat, I immediately proceeded towards the front of the building. And the reason you have no prints on any of the shell casings is I wear 2 pairs of gloves when loading every firearm, even in practice.
Now, what'd you say they heard?
They had heard the gunshots in the back and were coming this way to figure out what had happened.
So after that point, you said they were coming back to figure out what happened.
Came back to see what happened. All of a sudden I had 3 people in front of me, and I shot her 2 to 3 times in the chest. Not my best work. The owner and the manager ran for the door. Took off.
Okay, hold on. The owner.
When I came around that door, it was boom, 3 people right there.
Okay, so then what happened? They ran to the door?
They ran to the door. In the process of that, he crumpled in the door.
He crumpled in the door. Okay?
Did a tactical reload and dropped the other one.
Kohlhepp confessed to killing Charlie Carver, and he led the police to his body. He was buried in a shallow grave on the property. He had been shot 3 times in the torso. Next to his grave, another grave was dug, but it was empty. The police believe that the grave was meant for Caleb Brown. Kohlhepp then led the police to 2 other graves on his property. The police found the bodies of a man and a woman. The police determined that they were the bodies of 29-year-old Johnny Joe Coxey and his 25-year-old wife, Megan Lee McCraw Coxey. The couple went missing about 11 months earlier. Kohlhepp said that on December 19, 2015, he lured the Coxeys to his property with the promise of work. When he got them to the property, he shot Johnny to death. He then locked Megan in the shipping container. Megan's mother reported her missing on December 22nd. On Christmas Day, or possibly the day afterward, Kohlhepp led Megan out of the container. He then shot her in the back of the head. After confessing, 45-year-old Todd Kohlhepp was charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder. Many people were wondering who exactly was this mass murderer and serial killer. Eric Connor, a reporter with the Greenville News, wrote an extensive article about Todd Kohlhepp's background, and much of the following information comes from that article. Todd Kohlhepp was born in Florida in March 1971. His parents got divorced in 1973. When he was 5, his mother remarried. They eventually settled in South Carolina. Kohlhepp was an angry child. He rarely interacted with other children. When he did, he usually lashed out in anger. He would hit them and ruin their projects. Kohlhepp had been a member of the Boy Scouts, but he got kicked out because of his behavior. Kohlhepp was also cruel to animals. He shot a dog with a BB gun, and he poured bleach into a fishbowl that contained a goldfish. As a preteen, Kohlhepp spent 3.5 months in a psychiatric hospital because of his erratic behavior. Kohlhepp did not get along with his stepfather, and he worshipped his biological father. For over a year when he was a teenager, Kohlhepp lived with his father in Arizona. Kohlhepp thought that his biological father was distant, and he spent too much time with his girlfriends. In October 1986, when Kohlhepp was 15, he lured a 14-year-old female neighbor to his father's home. Once there, he pulled out a .22 caliber gun. He tied the girl up and taped her mouth. He then proceeded to rape her. Afterward, Kohlhepp walked her home. Someone called the police and Kohlhepp was arrested. He was charged with a slew of crimes, including rape and kidnapping. A psychological examination was performed on Kohlhepp. He was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. The report also said that Kohlhepp showed signs of ego inflation. It was also noted that he had an extreme rebellion against authority. Perhaps most disturbing, the report said, the only emotion Todd is capable of is anger. Todd Kohlhepp was a bright young man. He had an IQ of 118, which puts him in the above average range. It was decided that he would be tried as an adult for the rape. Kohlhepp made a plea agreement, and he pleaded guilty to kidnapping, and the rest of the charges were dropped. He was ultimately sentenced to 15 years in prison without the chance of parole. Kohlhepp had some disciplinary problems when he first got to prison, but eventually he started behaving himself. In prison, he worked in the cafeteria, did some landscaping and general maintenance. He also took vocational training in computer programming. Kohlhepp was released in August 2001 at the age of 30, and he moved close to where his mother lived in South Carolina. After being released, he got a job as a graphic designer with a sports apparel business. He was working there in November 2003 when he committed the Superbike Motorsports murders. Kohlhepp had not been considered a person of interest in the case. In 2006, Kohlhepp applied for his real estate license. In the application, he misrepresented his criminal convictions. His license was ultimately granted. He worked as a real estate agent for a while, and then he started his own real estate business. Eventually, it grew to employ a dozen real estate agents. In 2013, Kohlhepp got his pilot's license, which was a lifelong dream. After getting out of prison for rape, Kohlhepp had no legal problems until the police found Caleb Brown on his property. In May 2017, Todd Kohlhepp pleaded guilty to 7 counts of murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of sexual assault. South Carolina has the death penalty, and Kohlhepp was eligible to be sentenced to death. But because of a plea deal, he was given 7 life sentences. The police believe that Kohlhepp may have committed more murders. They think this because he has told them he has more victims. He also wrote a letter to a newspaper claiming they had killed more people, and he had even told the police and the FBI about these victims. But he did not feel like they took his admissions seriously. Kohlhepp told his mother that she does not have enough fingers to count the true number of his victims. But in the nearly 4 years since Kohlhepp was sentenced, he has not been charged with any other crimes. Todd Kohlhepp is currently serving his sentence at the Broad River Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina. Kohlhepp's surviving victim, Caleb Brown, sued him. In August 2018, she was awarded $6.3 million from his estate. Despite getting this money, life has not been easy for Brown since she was rescued. In early 2019, Brown was engaged to be married. Tragically, her 34-year-old fiancé died by suicide in February 2019. He died after he stabbed himself in the chest. Then, in July 2019, Brown was charged with third-degree domestic violence after her boyfriend called the police. He claimed that Brown punched him. The results of those charges are unknown. But many people are hoping that after such a traumatic experience, that Brown could get her life back on track. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Our producer and sound designer is Danelle Cloutier. You can find a link to her Instagram in the description box. If you just discovered our podcast, please check out our YouTube channel, Criminally Listed. We have about 275 videos featuring some riveting and chilling true crime stories. You can find it at youtube.com/criminallylisted. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow or subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks again for listening. Please take care and stay safe.